Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Deep Linkers. I'm here with my co-host Drew Grant and our very special guest, old friend of the show on and off camera is Kristian Harloff. Kristian, thank you for being here.
Old friend? I'm not that old. He's our old friend. He needs a walker.
Yeah. Kristian, we've been excited to have you on. I think you were one of the first people we sort of thought of having on when we were sort of developing even the idea for this podcast, just because you're someone that we've known in the internet space for a long time, and just working in the space before we got involved with the Schmoedown and sort of our own personal experiences, and so we know that you've been around the block in terms of like how things have evolved for a while, and just how crazy the internet has gotten in terms of just content creation, sort of cultural movement, stuff like that. So we want to just have you on today, pick your brain about some of that as well.
Yeah, and I would say I'm responsible for the two of you meeting. I'm happy for that.
That's true. Yeah, that is very true.
There'd be none of this if it wasn't for Kristian Harloff. So anyway, this is your grandbaby of a product here.
Yeah.
So.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah. Kristian, as we said, the main thing that we know you from is the Schmoedown. That was like the big project that you had going when we met you, and I got involved because you brought me on as the editor of the show. Drew was a competitor, and over the years since the show finished, we've done other projects, stuff like that. But every once in a while, even when I'm sort of just comparing things to the community-based aspect of other things like the internet, it kind of always comes back to the Schmoedown, because that was always such a sort of the epitome of what community-based like fandom could be for like a sort of unique project like that, something that's built just from the ground up around the people and like sort of the creation of what the project is. So I wanted to ask, you have a background in comedy, you have a background in like entertainment. What was your sort of transition into internet space, getting into the Schmoes Know era and stuff like that, and just like sort of finding that footing?
Well, it's funny because I remember vividly when YouTube became a thing. I was working at Silver Pictures. It was like 2005, and I was doing stand-up regularly, and there was other things. I saw people doing things on YouTube, and there was an editor at Silver. His name was Adam, and he was like, "Yeah, this YouTube thing," and it was kind of, remember being over his shoulder and him uploading one of my stand-up clips too, because I had no clue how to do it. And he did that, and I was like, oh, this could be a really kind of a fun thing. But I didn't jump into YouTube right away. I mean, I watched a lot of it. I tried to do some stuff with it, but I really didn't invest in it. It wasn't until around 2007 when my friend Martini Paratori, who was working at Current TV, and she said to me, hey, we're doing this thing where we're going to have a bunch of people watching television pilots, and we're going to get one of those, not even a flip phone, whatever those things were. It was like the disposable cameras that they just send you. And she's like, why don't you take one of your friends and see, comedians will pay in pizza and beer, and you guys watch it. Pizza and beer sold us. And of course, with that sell, I had to go get Mark Ellis.
Yeah.
So Mark and I were friends from the Comedy Store, and I knew him for, it was about 3 years at that point. And so I said, hey, they want us to watch these pilots. And we didn't do it on air together, or on camera together, rather. I shot mine, he shot his, and then there was like, I can't remember, 25 other people, whoever did it. And I remember the pilots, the two pilots that stood out were The Bionic Woman, because my relationship with Katie Sackhoff, and then there was Big Bang Theory was the other one, which is the pilot. So we submitted it. They liked us. We wound up being the two people that they wanted to go with. So we started doing the same type of format for movies. And then eventually I said to Mark, why don't we just do these together on camera? And he was, because he's got the stand-up comedy mentality, I don't want to do a duo act, because it's on stage, right? But then we tried it, and we realized that the chemistry was there, and we started doing it. So we were there for about a year. And then there was this whole thing that kind of happened with Rotten Tomatoes, and we were supposed to have a pilot, fell through, and we stopped doing stuff with Current TV. So Mark and I were having so much fun over the course of the year. Like, why don't we keep doing this, and why don't we try to put it on YouTube? And that was like the end of 2008. So we did, and we started Schmoes Know. We came up with we just wanted to present the average schmo, the average person's point of view, the same way you talk about movies after. So now you say that and you're like, that's what everybody does, but nobody was doing that back then.
Right.
And so we decided to do that, and that's how we kind of launched everything.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, as we sort of delve into, the present era of, content creation, we see like so much of that stems from what you're saying is that uh, a lot of the sort of big creators uh, started projects because they're like, I wanted to see something that's not being made by, mainstream television or like the old
Right.
school media, and so I'm just going to make it myself. That's sort of what gave birth to, like, the sort of flourish of, online channels and individual channels we have today. And yeah, so as you developed that and got into, like the Schmoes era and like the movie reviews, stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
that eventually got us to the Schmoedown. And I want to talk a little bit about that because it's such an important
Sure.
part of, our lives here. And the at the height of the Schmoedown, it was just such a huge roster of people. I think Emma Five called it the Super Smash Brothers, of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
online creators.
Mm-hmm.
What was sort of like went into that and sort of like, maintaining the brunt of it, because we've talked about it before off camera, just like it was a lot. It was a lot to sort of maintain in terms of like the individuals, like the scheduling, like the fans, like sort of like just making sure that's all running like your clockwork. What was, I guess, yeah, at the top of that, sort of what was the sort of huge lift that you had to do to sort of try to make that thing move?
My answer should be therapy, but I didn't do that. It's a lot of different things, and it depends on kind of which era you're talking about. Because if it's the Collider era when things were happening, they didn't believe in the show at first when we started doing it, and we got a sweet deal because of that, because they were like, okay, well, why don't you run it on Fridays, but the money that we're already paying you, you have to pay for it, but we'll air it on our channel and you can own it. So I was like, okay, because I just had so much confidence in it that I knew it would do well. And then obviously when it started performing, they're like, hey, we'll pay for it, and the episodes that we have, we want to own on our channel. So I was like, but that took a little bit to do, and the numbers started coming in, and it was once I started getting, I mean, even when I was paying for it, I had access to, and what I will say for what they did is that they let me use their studio, and they didn't have to pay for a studio. I had their crew, I had all that stuff. So being able to maintain that for a bit was great. So, even after I left, being an executive there, because that happened, the long story is I was freelance, then became an executive, and then left again. And when I left, because I don't even know if I've talked about this or not, but I almost left, because I wound up leaving in 2019, but I almost left in 2018. I almost signed with Skybound that much earlier, and I would have left I would have left before we even started doing like a lot of those live shows.
Right.
But I think what went into it was, well, one A thing that went into it was Mark Ellis and his continued support throughout whatever it is and whatever you needed him for. He was always there to do it. So, but it was that, and then with Skybound, it was a different set of things, a different set of rules. So, it really just depends on when you're asking of the different things that kind of went into it.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask something. I mean, because I think in a way, Kristian, you and I have sort of parallel stories. I also started on YouTube very early, but very early on, it was also like a lot of products I was making, or a lot of content I was making became products of the companies that I was working for.
Right.
And there's always a sense of, I'm my own thing, I'm my own brand, and I'm bringing a lot to the table, but it's always under kind of an overarching umbrella of a parent organization, which, with the Schmoedown moved a couple times. So how do you sort of deal with that sort of adjustment? Do you like it better as an independent creator? Or there's some safeties and protections that you're offered under an organization that you miss?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. There are things about, like, had it not been for Skybound, the show probably would have died even earlier, especially with COVID, happening. There's no world where I could have sustained the Schmoedown through just Patreon budget and running everything through virtual. There's just no way I would have been able to do it. And they just provided a lot of stuff that I was able to, do it for that many years. But the stuff that comes with it, that this is no fault to them, it's just the way it runs, is that when you're working for business, they have to, the practice and standards and the things that they have to do can get in the way of some of the other stuff that you did, because we were running it as a guerrilla faction. Certain things, even though there are probably things that were like, lawyers look at it and go, you can't do that. We did stuff and we were able to get away with stuff, and we just, just shot things and set things up with, hey, do we need to sign a contract for legalities there? Probably, but hey, no one's telling us we have to do it because it's just us. Whether it's probably not the best, but we did it, and then we were able to pull a lot of things out. And I know that even Jonathan, who ran our live things, I'm sure if you asked him, he would way more choose the era when it was just me and Mark running things, because too many people to go through in order to get his approvals of the theaters and the things he had to do. So there were probably a lot of less restrictions when it was running in independent, but more stressful when you don't have people to kind of help out, and especially budget wise. You have certain budgets and certain things that you can do, and so yeah, so it's like I think there's positives and negatives for both.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, and simultaneously, as like you said, we're getting to the sort of the digital era of things. That was sort of in COVID. That was just a sort of opportune time where obviously there was a big shift from Collider of everyone going and just spreading out into their own channels, stuff like that, and that was like a blessing in disguise because it kind of sort of gave everyone a leg up for what was to come with that era of everyone becoming content creators. So there was such a huge boom during that first year of the pandemic where everyone learned how to stream,
Yeah.
learned how to
Oh,
manage a
yeah.
StreamYard, got their own cameras, stuff like that, and that just sort of like shifted like the internet, online culture space for forever. And yourself, you were creating what you have now, which is like the
Mhm.
Kristian Harloff channel. What was that like? I guess sort of developing that, in terms of trying to make that work, like you said, on your own, while juggling the show itself, but also just trying to find your footing in terms of like having your own product that you can call your own, that you can then like look forward to in the future, that I feel like that you can be creative with.
Sure. That was me seeing the writing on the wall that there was only so much time the Schmoedown had left, because virtual was just like it was an unfortunate disease for the Schmoedown, because the show wasn't built. You know better than anybody. The show wasn't built to just be a virtual show. Had you not been editing a lot of those episodes, I've said this many times about you, is that you were the only one that was able to still keep giving it its personality that it's had because of the editing that you did. And then when you left, I was like, oh, but we were already in. But we were already in. We by the time we got back to doing in studio stuff and live events and all that, the show had taken such a hit in their viewers, and people were like, well, you can always get them back. And you just said it. You know how much content is out there? He's like, oh yeah, I remember that show. I don't watch it anymore. And they don't go back because you had it so you when you lose people, it's in that's it. That's anything. That's just not the internet. That's major network shows and everything too. It is very hard to get people back because they move on to the next thing. So I saw the writing on the wall, and I was almost like Tony Stark in the first Iron Man, when he's just in the cave making the suit, and that's what I was doing with my channel, because I took a risk because it was a Schmoedown Clips channel, and I had done SEN. I was doing SEN for a bit, and I didn't really like where that show was going because it almost turned into like a telethon. It wasn't really a show.
Yeah.
And so I said, because I was listening to the show, and I was enjoying. I wasn't on it, but I was listening to the banter. And then we had this thing called the Schmoebot, where you could interrupt if you put in a certain amount of money, and it would interrupt the show. Great financially because all that money was going to Skybound anyway, and great financially, but it just killed the volume of it, the rhythm of it. So I was like, I want to do the shows that I used to do. I want to do a show like that. So I started, at the time it was called The Big Thing, which is now the Kristian Harloff Show. But I started just slowly having people on the show. And then I was like, okay, let me try to do movie reviews. Let me try to do a couple reactions. Let me do that. And I started kind of just slowly throwing things in there. And I saw traction on it. And Skybound, who I can't really say a bad word about, on my way out was like, listen, we can't keep the Kristian Harloff channel because you're not going to be here. It's silly for us to do it. And they were generous enough to say, you can take it and go. So I was building it throughout. So when I left at the end of 2022, I just went all in on that channel.
Yeah, it's been impressive so far, just because it's been a few short years with it.
Mhm.
But you
Oh,
managed to
yeah.
ramp it up and move from LA to New York, and you've had like such a slew of guests on now that
Yeah.
are really exciting. You just today, as we were getting ready for this, we were listening to the Resi Felice interview, and it's just been great to see you sort of like reach out and interview people, because I think from what I've seen, that's always been sort of your preferred bread and butter. It's just like those conversations, those sit downs and chats with people about like sort of the nitty gritty of like what goes into the creative process. I guess in terms of developing those interviews and like that outreach. Like how has that experience been in just terms of like finding yourself and finding your own creative outlet as an interviewer?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it's not been a year or two. It's probably been about a 6 year to 7 year journey because I started. I mean, I love it. The interviewing is my. If I could just have an interview show and just do that in the same way that, like, whether it's Theo Vaughn or whoever these guys, Andrew Santino and those guys doing that show weekly, if I was able to sustain that, doing it once a week and doing big interviews and things, I would do that. I started an interview show at Collider. It's just called One on One with Kristian Harloff, and I, looking back now, I realized that had I stayed with that, and knowing the things that I do now with clip outs and shorts and all those things, I think that it could have been a lot bigger than it ultimately. But we were still doing at the time. You got to remember, Collider at a certain point, everything was getting 80,000 to 100,000 views, and you're like, and anything lower than that, if anything hit 20 or 30, you're like, oh no, that's horrible. Now, and monetization has changed so much on YouTube. A 20 to 30,000 video on whatever subscriber count you have, as long as your retention is there, is a great number, right? So that show was doing 20 to 50,000 depending on who it is, and it was doing decent. And then that ultimately turned to Collider Live, where we were doing interviews, and that was, I think, the most popular stuff that we were doing on that. So when I took it over to my channel, well, the SEN channel, I should say, and I tried to bring one-on-one back, and people weren't really watching the interviews, and I was getting kind of bummed by that. And then I would start doing them, and I realized that some of them would do okay. And even when I started this round of it here, I started with I actually started with Jamie Campbell Bower from Stranger Things, and
great.
Yeah, it was a good one. That one did decent, but then I had a comedian, Sam Morrell. I had him on, and that interview barely hit 4,000 views. And I was like, what in the world? This guy was popular, and he is popular, and and it's just the algorithm wasn't picking it up. So I made a decision to do something, which was, okay, what I can do is, now my shows are live. I do my live shows every day, Monday through Friday. I will lead with a big story, and I'll talk about that story with whoever's on there or myself or whatever it is. And then around 30, 40 minutes into it, I'll put an interview that I recorded, and I'll put that in there. And the views have gone up on that maybe like 50, 60% by doing it that way. But the reason also I started a clips channel. I started a YouTube or an interview clips channel, like any interview show has and should have. And I've seen way more success with that. Like I interviewed Mark Paul Gosselaar recently. And
Awesome.
It was great. And I talked to him about, and I knew because I was a big Saved by the Bell fan, and I talked to him about the fight that he had with AC Slater in one of the episodes, and I asked him about that. His interview, the full interview, did like 15,000 views. That clip now stands at 500,000 views.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And his collective clips are almost at 1 million views. And that pushes towards the interview. So that clips channel alone, I saw somebody say, "Why do you do clips? Why do you do interviews? Nobody cares about the interviews." And I said, 500,000 people would disagree.
Yeah.
Because it's clip outs, and that's where we live today. Going back to your intro, is that content's changed, things are different, the digestion of it is different. So when you do this, and you're like, "Oh, Saved by the Bell fight, what's that? Okay, I'll watch it. I'm on the toilet. I'll watch it. Okay, done. Okay, good. What's next?" And then you move on, and maybe you don't watch you're going to listen to the interview at the gym, in the car, prepping for something, cleaning your house, in the background. But the clips you're just going to watch quick, and maybe if I'm lucky on the suggested videos, you're going to see the next clip of him talking about Dustin Diamond, and then you're going to stick with that. Right. But some hit and some don't. Like I put some Matthew Lillard ones on today, and I'm bummed because I know how big Five Nights at Freddy's is. It's huge. Right. My daughter's a massive fan. I put 2 clips out of Five Nights at Freddy's. It hasn't hit yet. Doesn't mean it won't, but it hasn't hit yet. So it's a crapshoot, but that channel has delivered for me.
I mean, it's funny that you mentioned what the different ways people watch this kind of long form content, because Eric has started putting on videos while he's doing editing and I'm falling asleep. And there's been several occasions where I've had, this is so off topic, but long form dreams that have been like you and Roka talking, and I've just been trying to like talk back to you, and I'm like, oh, Viola has already been on Gotham, so he can't play the Batman. You're just not responding to me, and I'm like, what's going on, Christian?
True, that's not a dream, Drew. That's a nightmare.
It is. That's happened like more than once. So at this point, like I just wake up and I have like an inception dream from Kristian Harloff. But it will be the entirety of like an entire episode. So I'll remember like who's winning the World Series because I'm like, I was dreaming about Skinwalker Ranch, but like Kristian was there and he's talking to Roka about who's winning the World Series.
I love this. I love the Skinwalker Ranch reference.
Yeah.
I don't. Are you into the topic, Drew?
I am. Yes.
Okay.
Very much so. Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, I think that's probably what happens is like the algorithm has figured out that I will watch an entire episode of like you in my sleep.
Great. That's great.
But I want to ask actually, because I used to do a lot of interviews, celebrity interviews specifically, or celebrity showrunner interviews for the New York Observer. And then when I was moving out to the West Coast and was doing other stuff, doing Collider, it was even trying to do stuff myself. It was always harder to book guests because I didn't have that institutional backing. So how do you get around that? Like, do you find yourself a big enough personality now that you can just reach out one-on-one? The Schmoedown was always great for doing after show stuff. So, yeah.
No, I hired somebody. Because of exactly what you just said. I found myself there. I was booking people like Diego Luna. I got Perry Nemiroff helped me with that one. There were a couple that Perry had helped me with, and I was like, I can't just keep relying on Collider still. 5 years after I've been with them to book guests, I don't want to do that. And then I reached out to a few other people. Like Josh Horowitz helped me with some people. He got me Ian McShane. And I used contacts like that way, and I started reaching out to certain people. And obviously, whether it's Katie or Freddie Prinze Jr. or people like that who I'm friends with, they come on. But I was like, I can't just keep having the same people back and back. And if I really want to extend this thing and I really want to start a clips channel, I've got to have guests. So I went out and I talked to a friend of mine who, well, before I left, actually, I was having lunch with my attorney. And she had suggested reaching out to someone, and I had said, is that really the right call? And so she's like, I do think it's the right call, and she was right because I wound up reaching out to this person who was a producer on a very big talk show, and she introduced me to that talent agency. That talent booker. I had a great conversation with them, hit it off, and they've been delivering ever since.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, because you've gotten some really cool guests. We were talking a little bit before show. That's when people are like, it's awesome to see, just small, not small, but like independent creators, like being able to book these kind of guests that you would see on like late night shows or that are going to blow up and, be on Fallon or Kimmel. So that's just awesome to see.
Yeah. That line between, like you said, like old soul media of like late night talk shows, stuff like that, is being blurred more and more as things grow. I think Hollywood and stuff like that is just starting to pick up on the reach and power of what an online setting can do for an actor, director, something like that.
Look what's going on with politics right now. People are trying to get on podcasts more so than they are trying to do regular things because podcast numbers are doing better than traditional media at this point. Right. Because the age demographic is changing. And I remember when we got into this thing with Ellis and I, and we are, and still people don't remember it, but we were the first YouTube reviewers ever certified on Rotten Tomatoes, right?
No way.
Yeah, and people were also looking at it like, what is it? I remember, what is this YouTube? What is it? Now the studios are inviting influencers over critics now, and that was never the case. They wouldn't even let influencers, people who were on YouTube. It took us, we'd like bang on the door in order to get into press screenings. Right. I remember sitting with Ellis. It was like for True Grit or something. We looked over and we saw Leonard Maltin, and we're like, "What in the hell did we sneak in?" Yeah. It was like one of those moments. But it's just, it has just changed though, because the internet is so powerful and the demographic, and because look at the way movies have kind of taken a decline as in people going to see it. One of the things people never mention as far as why is the box office down so much? Who's the main? It's always been the main people that are the majority of the money coming in are like 17 to like 22 years old. 17 to 22 years old today. TikTok, everything else. Do you want to go see a movie? Nah, I want to watch. And if it's not 60-second videos, it's some YouTube video from some, 18, 21-year-old kid that they're watching now too. So it's shifted. So you're absolutely right that people are going to go out and it's more powerful now, this influence than it ever was.
Yeah, it's and as things sort of rubber band back, snap back towards, I think, what you had with the Schmoedown, like we're starting to see small independent creators develop large projects, large live
Mm-hmm.
events, large,
Yeah,
like studio based setting events, like Dropout, things like that. It's like, and I think it's just an era of new sort of form content competing with TV shows and movies, stuff
yeah,
like that. Like I want to stay home on a Friday night to watch the new Dropout episode, or to watch the new production of like my favorite channel that they're putting out weekly now.
yeah.
It's a third, just totally new form of content for people to enjoy. And I guess over the years, like for yourself, like how have you seen that evolution sort of shift? Yeah, like I guess we just said, like yeah, just the balance of old school media with like the new school.
Well, I think you said it before, where, and you're even doing this now for, and I read an article recently with Netflix or whatever. What's happening is that people are now, even to Netflix and Hulu, people are going out and shooting their own thing, shooting their own pilots, making
Mm-hmm.
their own costs, spending their own money, and then selling it to Netflix and other
Mm-hmm.
places because they can make themselves less notes, all those types of things. They might get notes if they get picked up and all that, but they can do what they want to do, and it's more conducive to do that, and there's so many more tools available to do that now than there were 15, 20 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that what is YouTube, what is TikTok, what is Instagram for creators? It's not only a place to make content, it's a marketing machine. You're
Mm-hmm.
your own marketing. You used to, if you were on a show or cast on something, you would hope that the studio then put the money into the marketing and that people would watch it. Now, like I said, before I got on with you guys, it's like I could, if I'm on TV, it's like, okay, here's my interviews, here's the thing, and then I go home. For me, I cut out the pieces. I go, okay, Renzi Felice was talking about potentially playing Miles Morales. I feel like people are going to want to see that clip. I put it on my clip. I do that. People then start to see my show, hear
Mm-hmm.
about the things, at least pay attention to more. So, oh, that's the guy that interviewed him on that Renzi Felice. That's the guy that interviewed Jillian Michaels. That's the guy that interviewed that person, that person, that person. And so I think that it's changed where you have so many more tools, because even though using this thing again, it's got this is the mini computer. It's got so much that you can do, and I can if I wanted to, while being on an interview with you guys right now, I can upload some stuff, I could do some stuff, I can make notes, I could give everything right here. And as much as I hate this freaking thing, it's also the reason that I'm able to build my business.
So when you're like actually at home, when you do have time off, whatever that means to you,
Yeah.
I mean, what do you find yourself watching? Do you find yourself going towards appointment viewing? Do you like watching the Batman on Sunday nights, or is it content as like we were just describing? Is it watching YouTube videos of other people that you like and are
Yeah.
our friends? And
Well,
what
right
do you just like generate towards? Yeah.
right now it's consuming me. If it's television shows or anything too, it's usually consuming me for the channel, because we even started doing like movie reactions and television reactions and things on the channel. So that stuff will normally kind of take over but I've been watching, thank God they won last night, but I'm watching the Yankees, and I'm watching this horrible World Series thus far. But I'll watch that. I'll watch some stuff. If my daughter, my 13-year-old or almost 13, wants to watch something, we will. Like the other day, we wound up watching. The three of us were watching. After my little one fell asleep, we were watching Saturday Night Live. So we were watching that together, and then I was going back and forth with now, like everybody else, I'm pretty much consumed with what's happening in the next week. So I've been watching a lot.
World Series.
Yeah, World Series and politics right now is what I've been watching, and then and it's not just another channel that I created, but it's also and I think it's the reason I started the channel, because I do have an interest in UAPs and UFOs, and those things develop, because there's a lot of things that people don't understand about it, and it's not. And I always preface it with, it's not about aliens. It's not about it's like, and I'll ask you this. This is the crazy thing about it. And Drew, maybe you know because you've been following it, but how familiar are you guys with the stuff that happened in December of 2023? You guys are familiar with Langley the base?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with what happened over Langley?
No, maybe
But
not,
you-
unless it's on your show.
Right.
Because
But that's
yeah.
but that's the crazy thing. So to blow your mind on this alone, and this is the type of stuff, because we don't know what it is in general, right? But in Langley, for 16 days, there were these things that were shown that were flying over Langley Air Force Base that people have video of and everything too. Not balloons, not lights, not anything else too, because they asked the Pentagon after weeks of not answering since people were doing more investigating on it. This was the other day. The Pentagon finally had a response and said, "Well, they weren't hostile, so we had nothing. We didn't do anything." It's not a foreign government, because the foreign government are sending drones in. Those, can I curse on this show?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Those fuckers are getting shot down.
Yeah, but it's Langley. That's where
It's
the
Langley.
CIA. I mean, like,
It's
that's
Langley.
right.
So the only thing that was said was they weren't hostile, so we didn't do anything. Well, then what was it?
What did it look like?
For 16 days, what was it? And there's no answer to it. And now there's going to be another thing, which is crazy. What I usually cover is the neglect on the mainstream media on how they don't. The fact that you guys don't know about this, I'm not asking you what to believe and what not to believe. I think that if you have there's another hearing, there's a hearing.
Really?
Yeah, right. How you don't know that is crazy. Like November 13th is when it's happening, and there's talk of them actually talking about a reverse engineering program and all these different things in front of Congress, not just like some drunk guy behind a barn in Alabama. This is like in front of Congress. People don't know about it because the mainstream media isn't covering it. So to go back to your point before, Eric, it's like, even though, yes, people are getting a lot of their information from the internet, the mainstream media and the mainstream stuff is still as powerful as it ever was.
Right, just in terms of what it keeps out, not in just in what
100%,
it keeps in.
100%.
Because when we've seen stuff, I've seen stuff in Burbank up in the sky, and every single time I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm going to go next door, like the next door app. Like, that's the only thing I can do, because that's the only other place people will be like, have you seen, like, who else is looking at the same stuff in the sky that we're looking at? I mean, the stuff with the Skinwalker Ranch is just interesting, because I didn't realize it was not so much UAPs or like anything. It's just like the weird, like,
just
electromagnetic,
crazy stuff going on.
just crazy stuff going on over there. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah, it all harkens back to like what I was saying. Yeah, it's just like it's the era of, if you want to see something that's not being made, you have to kind of sort of do it yourself. You sort of have to like step out, and the tools that we mentioned are just like so readily available that we see things sort of just like fire off like very quickly. It's just like, I want to make this happen. I want to like see this sort of product go out, and it's just like it becomes like just a huge wave of like noise of things coming at us. And you mentioned your daughter and stuff like that, and just like how has that been, I guess, for you? Living in the era of the internet for so long, and then now seeing it sort of continue through the eyes of like a new age consumer, which is like your daughter, who's like obviously the next generation of internet users. And like,
is she into Skibbity Toilet? Is that
I don't know. She like I said, she loves Five Nights at Freddy's, and she's also found this. I don't even know the name. I can't remember the name of it, but it's like this virtual comic that she's obsessed with right now. But finding stuff that it's like I feel like my dad. I don't understand that hip hop music, but it's like one of these things where But look, for me, I would smash my phone into 1,000 bits if I didn't have to use it for business, like I said.
Yeah.
So, and to try to get, like, I can't, it's a constant struggle in my house every day. I'm like, Vivi, are you on your phone? No. Hiding. I'm like, and I've got to go and I've got to make sure we plug it in. You just get a certain amount of time before it, because it melts your freaking brain. And some people just let their kids sit on it. And it's proven. It's got like there's a lot of stats that it drives kids into like depression and all those things. And I'm not saying don't let them be on it and look around and be creative, because you can, but I think there's like anything else, there should be a limit to it.
It's brain rot. It's literally brain rot, especially with this AI stuff that's coming up.
Oh, man.
I wanted to go back a little bit to the UAP thing for a second, only because I thought you had such an interesting way of dealing last summer when there were the strikes, the actor strikes and the writer strikes and all these Hollywood strikes, and it really took a hit on how people were creating content, especially in our group of extended acquaintances, because it is so much reactions and people covering movies and stuff, and there was this kind of push-pull of, well, either you're in SAG and you're thinking that's banned, or you don't know if it's banned or not, whether or not you can talk about recent releases, whether or not you can talk about older movies, whether you can talk about foreign content. And you guys pivoted, and you had this really great conversation, I think, with Dan Burrell and a couple other people about like just everyone's decisions and where they were coming from with it, because it was a really heated topic. Right, I remember you reaching out about that. Yeah. And so I just thought that was like such a interesting way of covering it, that you guys pivoted to covering this like congressional hearing and this kind of stuff happening in the real world. So was that like was that a conscious decision to break off from the movie and review content? Was that sort of just what was consuming your brain at that time? No, because I didn't shy away, as you remember the conversation, and neither did Dan.
I didn't shy away from talking about movies and talking about these. And I was in SAG, right? It's like I also reached out to them because of the being in the critics circle and being someone who covers movie news and all those types of things. I wasn't promoting people's movies. And I thought, look, I've very much so supported SAG and everything that they did and the way that they did it, and I continued to do so. Obviously, I'm in the union, but I didn't necessarily agree with the way that they would tell certain, and they weren't upfront with, and I shouldn't say upfront. They just weren't. They didn't respond to people that were not in the union, that were like Roxy. Roxy was terrified to talk about movies, and I'm like, you can talk about movies, and she didn't want to do it because her dream is to be working all the time as an actress, and she didn't want to step on any toes, and she never got answers, and it wasn't fair. But I understood it, but it was annoying because I needed her to talk about certain things, and she couldn't. And there were other people that started to do it, but the UAP stuff came because I was doing other topics, and I can't remember what it was. And it might have actually been because there was all these different topics I wanted to talk about. And Ellis was on the show, and he wasn't really talking about the stuff either, the movies. And there was this Vegas story that happened with potential UFO alien stuff and all these things. And I was not paying attention to the topic at all. I was kind of in the same way that Eric, when he hears about UAP, still kind of giggling a little bit because that's what we've been taught. But that's what we've been taught for years.
No, absolutely.
Until you dive into it and realize what the hell's going on, then you go, oh shit. But I was doing the same thing, the kind of, right?
Yeah.
And then when I mentioned it in my intro, I'm like, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about these Vegas things. And we didn't bring it up. I forgot to. And there were so many comments. How come you guys didn't? You said you were going to talk about that. How come you didn't? How come you didn't? And I was like, oh, shit, maybe next time I will talk about it. And then randomly, so I really do believe in kind of fate when it comes to certain things, because I was sitting on my couch watching, I don't remember what it was, something on Disney Plus, and they have National Geographic. And there's a series on National Geographic calling UFOs Investigating the Unknown. So my thought process was like, okay, this is going to be ancient aliens and all that kind of History Channel shit. But it wasn't. It was about the actual pilots in the military and people behind the scenes and higher level officials that if they are lying, then we're in trouble because we have crazy people who are running the place.
Right.
And you hear all of these interviews. I'm like, holy shit, this goes so much deeper than I thought it would for 5. And I was all in. And then randomly, within a couple of days later, or maybe it had been a couple of weeks later, David Grush, who was on News Nation and worked on the program, came forward, whistleblower, and then the hearings happened, and I just started covering it because I was interested in it. And then I said, well, they did well for us, and I was like, well, let's just do this. Tuesday, I didn't even have a show. I didn't run I was doing shows on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and Tuesday was open. So I was like, well, I'll just do that show, and it became my biggest show that I did, and so much so that I took it off my main channel and created a whole separate channel where I do a UAP piece Monday through Friday. I do a piece every day. Not Saturday and Sunday, but every day Monday. Right. There's that much news and more
really?
So. Yes. And I actually just mentioned this on my channel. On that channel, I said I'm considering doing 2 videos a day because there's so much stuff I'm not able to cover.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's just called Down to Earth with Kristian Harloff.
Okay. I didn't know you were still doing it. I thought the Skinwalker Ranch setting of the dream was like something that I came up with. No, that's probably
every
something
day.
You guys mentioned.
Every
that's
day.
crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not crazy, but I mean,
I know what you mean.
That's great. And it's also inspiring because, it shows that there is this, kind of outside the box content creation you can still do. Like, you don't have to be wedded. And I think this is one of the great things about being an independent creator. You don't have to be wedded to one type of thing that you're doing. It's not your job to make movie reaction.
Right.
Like, it's your job is whatever you think it is and whatever your audience wants it to be. It's to go in that direction and kind of experiment and play with it. And
that channel does significantly better than that channel. We started in March and it just crossed 35,000 subscribers.
Wow.
And my last, and those videos can do anywhere between 20 to 60,000 views a piece, and that's considerably better than the channel that I have with 160,000 subscribers. So it's like, it's because now there's a lot of different things. People who are into this topic are really into this topic, and it's also, there's also just more information coming out, plus the fact of all the stuff happening on November 13th that I think more people are searching for it, and there's more things that are happening with it. And yeah, and when Lou Elizondo was out doing his tour that he just released his book, we all saw, everybody in the UAP community saw the numbers go up because people wanted to hear what he was saying and what he was talking about. So we covered a lot of his topics.
Yeah. So is November 13th going to be the new?
That's the next hearing. That's the next congressional hearing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating.
It's a lot of stuff going on. But I mean, Kristian, like that's ultimately being, I think, your sort of secret weapon is your ability to pivot and to sort of keep evolving in spite of how the algorithm has sort of set that against a lot of creators. So the algorithm sort of tells you, don't change, like stick to one thing and like find your footing and don't do anything different because otherwise we're not going to promote it. We're not going to help you. Like you got to just figure out to do one thing for the rest of your life so people will support that. And then it sort of stifles a lot of creativity. So I guess to sort of help wrap up here, like what would you say is that approach you have towards following what you say is fate or like the audience or just anything that you feel is the right direction to go when one thing's not working and you want to find something else to fulfill your creativity?
You got to pay attention to what the audience wants. That's always the number one thing. And I always give credit when a question like this comes up to Greg Alba because Greg is so good at paying attention to the algorithm, the things that work. He pays attention to his audience. He knows how to time things out. He does a lot of different things, and he's been involved in the game and watched it. Because I went through a thing during my Schmoedown era. Like Schmoedown was my tunnel vision, right? Schmoedown, I wanted to, and unfortunately it didn't happen. But I wanted to make it, worldwide thing, a worldwide thing to where it was like everybody knew what it was, and it was essentially Jeopardy meets wrestling, and it was going to be a household thing. Didn't happen, but it was my dream to make it happen. That was my tunnel vision. So my job at the during Collider was working in the movie things and all that stuff. But Schmoes even took a back seat during that time because of my obligation to Collider, but also because I was working on Schmoedown all the time. So, if you looked at Schmoes, the numbers kind of went down on it and all those things. And then I started really reaching towards the Schmoedown goals, but Greg Alba stayed and paid attention to everything that was going on with the algorithm, all these changes. So when I was, first, Greg really believed in the Schmoedown, right? And so he and I, because during the digital age, it was tough, and you guys know, it was just so hard where you're sitting behind it was just such a different moment where in the live era or the studio era, you lose a match, you feel like bummed, but then you turn to your right and you have either your partner there or you have a friend there and they console you, and it's like you talk it out, you go have a beer at Barney's and you feel better. At the Collider or the digital era, you lose a match, you turn off your computer, and you're just sitting there in your underwear, looking around, going, "What am I doing here?" Like, and then you just get bummed, and and a lot of those moments happen. And Greg, there was a moment, I can't remember what it was, but he was upset about something, and something happened in the Schmoedown, and I called him up, and we had like a really good conversation, and we realized more so that we were always friendly, but that day we really became good friends.
Oh,
and,
that's great.
And he called me up, and he was like, "Hey, I want to help out the Schmoedown. I want to help out and see," because I noticed, because I was bummed about the digital views and everything too, and he was helping me with certain things. We tried new things, and it just wasn't catching the right way. But when I started doing my channel, I called him right away, and I was like, "Look," because I was used to. I remember remember that movie Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds?
Yeah.
So that movie had been out for a bit. And so on my channel, I'm like, I'm going to do a review of Free Guy. It was out for people like my reviews from Schmoes Know, and my review, and reviews like that would do 30 to 50,000. So I'll do that. And it ate shit. And when I did it, and I was like, "Hey, what the hell's going on?" And when I was talking to Greg, he's just like, "It doesn't work like that anymore. It just doesn't work like that." And he's like, "Try this, do this." And and I was trying to do things, whether it was description, keywords, hashtagging, thumbnails, like all that stuff, programs to use, all those things. And he just gave me, like, it was, as I mentioned before, like I looked at it where the Schmoedown was, I always pictured, there you go, Drew, back to space, right? Where we're in space and like there's all these different like ships. And I feel like there was the Collider ship, and it just took a big shot in the belly and blew up, and then somebody else just took the remains and took it and did whatever with it. And then there was the Schmoedown ship, and the Schmoedown ship was doing really, really well for a bit, even into 2020, and then COVID hit it with a bomb, and it was able to had smoke coming out of it for about 2-3 years, then it just blew up. But during that time, as I said, I was building that little ship, And I took the ship and I went out, and now the ship is just getting more and more shiny with more things in it. And I have like little side ships that are doing things, and it's like it's like building it out. And I think that it's just I think it's just watching that happen, and the advice that Greg Alba gave me continually, and still to this day, you know, we talk about things. He gave me something recently, like a month ago, that just helped me tremendously. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I mean, look, I really appreciate that last Battlestar metaphor. I think that really works for me. That is a really great way of thinking about it. You always kind of have this escape pod that you can take out yourself and then build out the ships from there until you have a whole fleet again. So I guess my final question is back to the UAP thing.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the theory that, you know, it's interdimensional as opposed to interstellar? I mean, there's something that
I love that theory, and that's kind of something that David Grush has hinted at. Other people have hinted at that. It's, if you look at it this way, from the things that they say, because it's not just that though. Because I always have the question, because they talked about how there's certain things in space and there's other things that are coming, and then that light travel is not possible. It's like, how do you know if it's not possible for us? You don't know if it's possible for somebody else. But the stuff that, whether it's anti-gravity, we don't really know how time and space works. We don't. We have no clue. And quantum physics, I wish I knew, because I'm fascinated by it. But we just don't know how it works, what's able to happen, what there are these other planes and things that I think it is way more realistic, in my belief, of interdimensional, being able to move through time and space with a certain type of technology through, you know, if you're able to look at us. People always say, well, humans, we're smart enough to know certain things. So what if we're not the smartest though? What if we're the dumbest?
Yeah.
What if we are the dumbest, and then the actual smartest things that you couldn't even fathom? How do you know they can't figure out time and space and those types of things? But you don't. The first thing you do is go, well, that's just science fiction. There's no way. When you look at the actual science of it, science-wise, it's possible. The question, we haven't figured it out, but it's possible to do it. And if you look at, it's T. Thompson Brown. There's a great documentary or piece that Jesse Michaels did on, and he talked about T. Thompson Brown. And he talks about how he was kind of the father of anti-gravity. Watch that. Yeah. Check that out. And so I do think that that's very possible. I think there's a lot more. And that's why I'm so curious to see, because the November 13th hearing has to be something big enough. This is what I say. It has to be big enough for Eric to go, oh shit. Like, it has to be. Like, it can't be one of these things that, like, he doesn't hear about, or he just like, oh, that's the crazy shit that Kristian talked about. It's got to be something that he goes, oh, wait a minute. Because, and I use him as an example of like anybody else who's not paying attention to it, because most people that I have that same conversation that I had with you guys, or anybody watching this right now, would say, oh, he's a crazy person talking about, you know, aliens or other things, sure. But when you dive into and you look into it, because I was that person 2 years ago, when you look into the information of what's out there, you start to go, oh, but you can't do another hearing of, well, I heard from a person who heard from a person who heard from a person. You've got to have that oh shit moment that people who weren't paying attention are now kind of unplugged from the matrix.
Yeah.
Do you, I guess my final question, do you have like a plan or contingency for, like, if that happens, say something does blow up like huge and like it becomes like just mainstream news, in terms of how you want to approach that for the channel?
I mean, you know, I think it's going to be a lot of people paying attention to that stuff, and I feel like more people come in to get what's happening. But it's like, I think for me is I'm just going to cover it the same way that I've been covering. I'm just, my hope is that there's just more and more information and more news, because there's a reporter in Washington named Matt Laszlo, and he asks every single, he's there for Congress, and he's the one that they know every single time they see him, he's going to ask something about the UAP stuff. And they're finally, I just told you guys about that thing for Langley. There were two other reporters that wasn't Matt Laszlo. More reporters need to start asking questions. And when that starts happening, it'll help channels like myself, because there'll be more news to cover than just going to the sources that I'm going to now. There's certain Twitter accounts that I follow, or places that I go that I hear about what's happening in Congress, because that's what I cover more so. I cover more so what's going on in Congress than I do kind of the woo-woo stuff, which is fascinating to me. But like, I more so cover the things that's happening inside of Congress, because I feel like that's the stuff that you guys should know about, because You turn on whether you're watching CNN, you're watching Fox, you're watching CBS, whatever you're watching. I just find it fascinating that if this type of news is out there with military and people like that, I'm not telling you that you have to have pundits out there that are going, oh, yeah, you got to believe it. Chuck Schumer's out there. He's a Senate Majority Leader talking about UAPs. Oh, we got to believe it. No, because that actually happened. He talks about it. This is the Senate Majority Leader talking about it. And you either have a conversation with two people going, why is this nutbag the Senate Majority Leader if he's talking about non-human intelligence? But they're not even covering that. And that to me is bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
I mean, I never really put it that way, but like, yeah, you're right. I mean, it seems like it's lined up too with a lot of election stuff, so you can almost forgive it for a second, but then no, you're right. It's been going on since like 2023.
It is, and they don't. Yeah, they're not covering. There's like one of the things we talked about this on the UAP show was yesterday, and there is a Republican named Tim Burchett who is one of the guys who is kind of leading the charge for disclosure, right? There's a lot he does for UAP stuff that I think he's doing the right thing. But there's the other thing that is the only topic that I have found that is about it, that should be, and it was during those hearings, about as bipartisan as you can get. Because at one point you had AOC and Matt Gaetz sitting next to each other at the hearing, not killing each other.
I remember that.
It was huge, and like that, and then because of the election and all this thing. Burchett would go on there. He's like, well, he's a Democrat. He can't get it done. Or he said something along the lines of like, well, Trump will be the disclosure president, so vote for him. And it's just like, come on, you can't you can't do that. I said the thing that would, to me, like Moskowitz is a Democrat and he's into it too. If you ask Moskowitz and he goes, I think Trump will be the disclosure president. I hate to say it. I'm going to take that valid in the same way that I would take if Burchett goes, I hate to say this, but I think Kamala would actually disclose. Then I'm going to take it valid because I know you don't want to say it.
Yeah.
But if you're saying your person, if you're saying your person is going to do it, I'm not going to believe you until after the election's over.
Right. Oh, yeah, there's gonna be a lot to say after the election's over. I mean, there'll be a new president-elect presiding over your new vice president-elect. Presiding over.
Yeah. Maybe this stuff might get torpedoed by the time this comes out. Who knows? Like, we'll see.
When does this come out?
Probably in a week and a half.
Okay, so a week and a half. So we'll be right. We'll be right after the election, but we'll be right near the new hearing.
Right.
Oh, this is great. This is great. Time-wise.
We'll line it up. Kristian, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on, man. It's been great catching up. Where can we find you on the various channels on social media?
Well, if you do care about the topic, you can go to my Down to Earth with Kristian Harloff channel, and that's Monday through Friday. I do videos. I have my Clip Outs channel for my interviews with celebrities and people who are promoting stuff. You can go and check. That's just Kristian Harloff Clips, and then my main channel is Kristian Harloff channel.
Awesome. You can find me at Nerd Chronic across social media. You can find Drew at VIDEODREW across social media. You can find us at Passion Fruit for Us across social media, and find our links to our Discord and Patreon down below. We'll catch everyone on the next episode.
Bye.
Thanks.